Why did the British construct famines all over India? How would they benefit from these famines? Would that not cost them in the long term by decreasing tax collection and loss of manpower for their informal slavery? Why would it? Why? It's a good question. Why, if the British are occupying India, why would they have people die off in the millions? Why not keep them alive and have more tax, right? So understand this. We know what happened in 1857, War of Independence. And the British had a very hard time, surviving that. And before 1857, there was more opposition to the British. Our land was under foreign occupation. It was a brutal occupation. And we fought, our people fought the British. Now, what's the best way to prevent a people from fighting? You starve them. You starve them. If they don't have food to eat, how will they fight? India was the home of 330 million people. It's okay to kill a few million every year. It'll keep them in check. If they're all skeletonized and starving, how will they fight us? We can still tax them. That's why the British starved Indians. That's how the British engineered famines in India. Now, the question also arises, how did the British engineer famines in India? How did they do it? I mean, how do you engineer a famine? So the British were very systematic in engineering famines. They had very exploitative economic policies, very exploitative agricultural policies. They obviously prioritized their interests, their commercial interests, their imperial interests. Uh, they how do you start a famine? You force farmers to stop planting food crops. You force them to plant cash crops. You make them plant opium, which you will then sell to China and extract silver and gold out of China through opium taken out of India, which you obtained by forcing farmers to grow opium instead of food crops. So you're forcing farmers to grow opium. You're forcing them to grow indigo. You're forcing them to grow cotton. But who is going to grow the food grains, right? So that's one way of constructing a famine, of engineering a famine. Then when a famine happens, you you are the government in some parts of India, so you will do famine relief measures. What kind of famine relief measures you will do? You will say, okay, you people are starving. I'll give you a solution. You guys come and do hard labor for me. In exchange for the hard labor, I will give you this much food. So that is famine relief, right? The British had extremely exploitative land revenue and taxation. They had something called permanent settlement. They had something called the horrific Rayatwari system. Right? They stole all the land of the Indians. Today, Indians don't have land, right? Why do Indians don't have not have land today? Indians don't have land today. Most Indians have no land. Before the British came, most Indians had land. Before the Turks it came, even more Indians. Everybody had land. Today, most Indians don't have land. They go to cities and they live in rent and whatnot. What happened to the land of the Indians? The British government took it, and then it was passed on to the Indian government and Zamindari system and all kinds of horrific things. The Rayatwari system. It stole the land of the people. The British imposed extremely high, exorbitant land taxes. They forced farmers to do subsistence farming, and that too of cash crops instead of food crops, in order to not be killed, so that they can pay their taxes to the government. High taxes, theft of land, forcing people to grow cash crops, no food security. When we had Indian kings, there was food security. The Indian kings used to maintain huge reserves of grains, because every few years there's the El Nino kind of a situation, and maybe 2 3, maybe 1 or 2 years there's the monsoon fails. But if you have sufficient reserves of grains, you can distribute them and you can waive off the taxes for that year. That's what the Indian kings would do. That's why India never had famines. Even if you go back to Rakigari and Bhirana and all that, like 5,000, 7,000 BC, you see these huge grain silos in which grain could be stored in tons. So India always had this system. The British destroyed all of that. Hmm? Then, whenever there is a famine, the British would export the grains to Britain and to other British colonies. So, and then you would have some grain, but the farmers would have to buy it from the British. at extremely high rates, and because the farmers are taxed so heavily, their purchasing power is next to nothing, right? And whenever you had famine relief camps, they would give less food than the Nazis gave to Jewish prisoners in their concentration camps. So there was increased mortality in these famine relief camps, and the epidemics, the death toll, nobody counts, right? And the British, you know, what the British lovers tell us, the British gave us railways. They constructed the railways for us. Without the British, we would not have the railways. The railways were the infrastructure of extraction. If you had a railway network across India, then maybe if there's a famine in some part of India, you could transport the grains and whatnot there. But the railway system was constructed for extraction, which is from the places where you have mines and resources the British want, to the ports like Mumbai, Kolkata, wherever. The railways were only used for extraction, they were never used for famine relief. Food movement, nothing. So everything collapses, right? And in India, another thing, Indian kings, emperors, queens, whoever, they invested in irrigation. You would have ponds in every village, you would have canals everywhere, you would have dams, right? The British invested in railways and they killed off all the irrigation, right? So that caused more vulnerability to drought and so on. I can just go on and on how the British engineered, they constructed, they designed, engineered, and implemented famines all across India. The objective, and whether Indians died or lived, they would get what they want. They did not want taxes from India, they wanted resources from India. They wanted labor from Indians. And they got it anyway. India was a land of plenty. If a few million Indians die, there are so many more Indians to work for the British. So 1 year you can have a famine in Odisha. 1 year you can have in Tamil Nadu. 1 year you can have in Gujarat. Next year you can have in maybe three other parts of India. You keep on moving the famines around and ensure that people are just oppressed all the time. That's what the British did. Very systematic policy, extremely intelligently executed. The British, probably the most evil thing the British have ever done anywhere.